You read about the investor who turned $1,000 into millions on a single bet. You hear about the entrepreneur who dropped out of college and built a global empire from a garage. These stories are powerful. They feel like a map, a blueprint for success that you can follow. But this map is dangerously incomplete. What you don't see are the 99 other investors who made similar bets and lost everything. You don't hear about the thousands of entrepreneurs who dropped out and whose companies vanished without a trace. You are only seeing the survivors. And focusing only on the survivors is one of the most subtle, yet costly, mental errors you can make. This isn't a simple oversight. It's a fundamental glitch in how our brains process information, a cognitive bias known as survivorship bias. It's a silent architect of bad decisions, convincing you that success is far more common and the path to it far clearer than it actually is. It makes you overestimate your chances of success by hiding all the evidence of failure. This bias is everywhere. In business, we study the companies that succeeded, not the thousands that went bankrupt. In the stock market, we idolize the funds that performed well, ignoring the ones that closed down. We are making critical judgments based on a data set that has been systematically stripped of all the negative outcomes, creating a dangerously optimistic illusion. The result is a world full of flawed advice, risky strategies that seem safe, and a constant feeling that you're doing something wrong because you're not achieving the same spectacular results. You are playing a game where you can only see the winning lottery tickets, and you're being told that buying a ticket is a brilliant strategy. But how did this mental glitch become so hardwired into our thinking? The most famous example of overcoming this bias comes not from finance, but from a life-or-death situation in the skies of World War II. Understanding this story is the first step to rewiring your brain to see the whole picture, not just the triumphant survivors. During the war, the U.S. military wanted to add armor to their bombers to protect them from enemy fire. But armor is heavy. Too much would make the planes inefficient. They needed to place it only where it was most critical. So they analyzed the bombers that returned from missions and meticulously mapped every single bullet hole. The military leaders initially thought the solution was obvious: reinforce the areas with the most red dots, the places that were hit most often. It seemed like simple logic. But a statistician named Abraham Wald looked at the same data and came to the exact opposite conclusion, a conclusion that would save countless lives. Wald's genius was in asking a different question. He didn't ask where the bullet holes were on the surviving planes. He asked, where were the bullet holes missing? He noticed that areas like the cockpit and the engine had almost no damage on the planes that returned. The military saw this as evidence these areas were safe. Wald realized that data was telling a hidden story. The missing holes were the critical insight. The reason there were no holes in the engines of the returning planes was that the planes shot in the engine never came back. They were at the bottom of the ocean. The military was only studying the survivors. This is the essence of survivorship bias. The evidence you see is misleading because the failures, which carry the most important lessons, are invisible. You must train yourself to look for the missing holes in every financial success story you hear. You have to learn to see the ghosts in the data. This isn't just a historical anecdote. This exact mental error is likely costing you money right now in at least 3 key areas of your financial life. Once you see how this bias systematically corrupts your decisions about investing, career choices, and even your spending, you can never unsee it. Let's start with the most common one: your investments. First, consider your investment strategy. You hear about a fund manager who has beaten the market for 5 years straight. It's tempting to put all your money with them, but you are only seeing the survivors. For every one successful manager, there are dozens whose funds performed poorly and were quietly shut down, their records erased from public view. This creates the illusion that beating the market is a matter of skill you can buy into. In reality, when you account for the failed funds, much of that outperformance can look like pure luck. By focusing only on the winners, you are systematically underestimating the risk you are taking. You are betting on a horse without knowing how many fell before the finish line. Second, this bias corrupts your career and business decisions. We celebrate the founders who dropped out of school to start their companies. This narrative implies a causal link. Dropping out leads to success. But we don't see the silent graveyard of millions who dropped out and are now struggling financially. Their stories are not told. By following the survivor's path without seeing the full context, you might take extreme risks with your career, believing the odds are in your favor when they are not. The real lesson from the successful dropout is not that dropping out is a good idea, but that they possessed other traits like extreme resilience, timing, and luck that are not part of the popular story. Third, and most subtly, it affects your perception of wealth and spending. You see successful people online with luxury cars and expensive vacations. You start to believe that these items are prerequisites for success, or symbols of it. You are seeing the survivors of a high-consumption lifestyle, but you are not seeing the immense credit card debt and financial ruin of those who tried to emulate that lifestyle and failed. This invisible pressure leads you to make spending decisions based on an incomplete picture of reality, trapping you in a cycle of trying to look successful instead of actually becoming financially secure. So how do you fight a bias that works by hiding information from you? The solution is not to find more data, but to change the very way you look at the world. The first step to counter this bias is to actively search for the graveyard. When you hear a story of success, make it a mental habit to stop and ask, how many people tried this and failed? What does the failure look like? This practice alone forces your brain to seek out the missing data, breaking the illusion of certainty. Instead of reading another biography of a famous CEO, find a book or an article about a major business failure. Instead of just looking at the best-performing stocks, look at the list of companies that were delisted from the stock exchange. Intentionally exposing yourself to failure stories provides the necessary context that survivor stories lack. You are reinforcing the parts of the plane that have the missing holes. Second, deconstruct the process, not the person. Don't try to clone a successful investor's portfolio. Instead, study their underlying principles of risk management, their decision-making framework, and their psychological temperament. The success you see is a single outcome of a repeatable process. The process is what you can learn from, not the lottery ticket they happen to hold. Focus on broad principles that are true across a wide range of successes and failures. Principles like diversification, consistent saving, and managing your own behavior are less exciting than a story about one big win, but they are far more robust because they account for the fact that failure is a common and unavoidable part of the system. Finally, apply probabilistic thinking. Instead of seeing a successful outcome as a guarantee, see it as one point on a wide spectrum of possibilities. Ask yourself, if 100 people with the same skills and resources as me attempted this, how many would realistically succeed? This shifts your focus from the single inspiring story to the statistical reality. By training yourself to see the hidden graveyard, to study the process instead of the outcome, and to think in probabilities, you can immunize yourself against the dangerous allure of survivor stories. But this bias looks outward, at others. There is another, related bias that looks inward, distorting the memory of your own financial past, creating a cycle of regret. So we've revealed the invisible lie embedded in every success story. The world is not as orderly or predictable as the stories of survivors make it seem. By only showing you the winners, this bias gives you a broken map, encouraging you to underestimate risk and ignore the fundamental role that luck and failure play in everyone's financial journey. Your new mental tool is to always look for the missing holes, just like Abraham Wald. When presented with evidence, your first question should no longer be, "What am I seeing?" It must become, "What am I not being shown?" This shift from passive observation to active investigation is the foundation of clear financial thinking. By arming yourself against this external bias, you've taken a massive step towards making decisions based on reality, not on a curated narrative. You can now see the world with a more critical and accurate lens, protecting you from the hype and false promises that lead so many astray. You've fixed how you view the success of others. But now a new challenge emerges. What about how you view your own past when you look back at a stock that soared after you sold it, or a mistake that cost you money? Your brain plays a different trick. It rewrites history, making the outcome seem obvious and predictable all along. This makes you feel foolish and paralyzes you with regret. This illusion, where the past seems clearer than it was, is caused by another powerful cognitive bias. It's the force that makes you kick yourself for missing warning signs that were never actually there. The next step in your journey is to understand and dismantle this internal mechanism of regret, so you can learn from your past without being imprisoned by it. To learn how to break free from the trap of regret and make forward-looking decisions with confidence, you need to understand how this bias rewrites your memory. The video on your screen right now is your guide. Click it, and let's take back control of how you see your own story.